further ado, we'd love to introduce Greg, and I'll see if I can't fix this, whatever you did. But here you go.
Thanks, Alex. Is this on? Can you guys hear me?
It's for the camera.
Oh, it's for the camera. Hello, camera. I'm a social worker and a mechanic. Tech computers are, I'm technologically disadvantaged, and so that's what the problem is going on here. I just wanted to make sure all you guys got a cup of coffee because you are all one in a million. Thank you very much for coming out. Let me kind of get started here. I kind of have a unique story, so I have a skill set that probably I've never met anybody with the same skill set, and you probably won't either. So, I was a social worker for many years. Kind of before that, I went to a boarding private school, and I realized that elitism wasn't for me. I knew that if I was going to make a ton of money, I was going to be doing something that I loved to do, and I wasn't ever going to sell my soul. So just remember that further on down the line. So I went to college in Rhode Island, got a bachelor's degree, started working as a life skills coach just outside of Boston, and it was good. I worked for a DMR group home, and we get it working yet? Sweet. Thanks, buddy. And so it was just maintenance. It was just checking off, making sure they're fed, making sure they're medicated, make sure they've got something to do if it was within the budget, And I knew that there was more for me, so I quit my job for the first time and moved back home, and I started working at a youth detention center. It's like the last step before a group home. I was the manager of one of the cottages, and it was great. I started working off with a population that I wasn't really that excited about. It was just younger kids, like 13 or 8 to 13, and I really respond well to teenagers, and they respond well to me. It's weird to say, but I like working with teenagers. That doesn't mean anything weird, I promise. And so, where's the camera over here? So, let's see. We started working with kids, and then I had the opportunity to take a layoff because they were closing one of the units. As a lot of you guys know, they were a lot of the residentials for kids and even adults were closing because they wanted to bring them into group homes. Kind of a big epidemic that happened over the last 2 or 3 decades. And so I started working with troubled kids, and I knew that was the population that I loved. And it was very troublesome for me because I had to put kids in holds, and that just I had a kid in a hold on a Saturday night, and I was just ready to just hit him with my fists, and I knew I had to walk out of there. There was nothing that could stop me from leaving that place, and that's just you always have to find your limits, especially with the social workers. One of the quotes with that is you got to give takers have to no givers have to. What was that? Givers have to set limits because takers don't have any, and that's a very true thing, and that's the kind of the essence of what happened to me there. So I started working as a what do you call that? Intensive foster care agency back in Massachusetts, and we it was just saw the kids once a week, and we. Didn't have enough interaction with them, and it was just more I knew that I needed to do more, and I really love working on cars. So 6.5 years ago, I had an epiphany where I wanted to be an auto shop teacher. Sounds great, but there really is no set subscribed way to become an auto shop teacher. Ask me. I know. And so I quit my job for the second time and went to tech school, a place very similar to Intellitech. And for those of you that know of any mechanics from Intellitech, it's kind of hit or miss with those guys. That's a whole other story that we can have maybe in person. And so, I knew that I wanted to become this auto shop teacher, and I was trying to get this experience. I need to go work as a tech for a few years after graduation of thank you. And so we can move. That's actually some of the kids from the DMR group home. Some car part art stuff. This is we'll leave this on here for a minute. It's pretty good reading for you guys. Thank you, Steve. I really, I was on this journey, and I was working as a technician. I worked for a couple dealerships and a couple of independent shops, and I was changing oil at a Midas. Here I am with a bachelor's degree, went to tech school, making $12 an hour, paying a ton in student loans, and just making it happen, making it work. So I kind of had this breakdown in somebody's car. I didn't break into somebody's car, I promise you. I we wanted to work for Subaru, and I'd had this WX for a long time, and so I quit my job again and applied to every Subaru dealership in a 1,500-mile radius that was looking for a technician. And 3 weeks later, I packed my stuff and one-wayed it to Sheboygan, Wisconsin from Massachusetts. It's about 1,100 miles. I had a big U-Haul trailer behind my little Subaru, and one-wayed it there. It was pretty, it wasn't too bad, but what they say about Wisconsin is it's a big alcoholic state. There's people that just generations of alcoholism. It was just really miserable. Sorry if you're from Wisconsin, but I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And so I spent about 8 months there and knew it was time to leave, so I applied to every Subaru dealership in Colorado because I'd been out here a few times, and I came to Colorado Springs. I worked at the dealership here for a while. We parted ways over some ethics type things like we talked about, not selling my soul for $1. And then, so I started, before I met my score mentor, the one that I currently have, I went there about 6 or 8 months before, and the guy just, this guy right here. And so, he kind of put me on the right path, and then I really need something new, and I came back again, and Steve was really helped me out. I don't know if I'm sure you guys all know who the Score mentor is. And so Steve's really helped me out quite a bit. That was about a year ago, I would say. And so ever since then, everything's kind of been going in the right path for me. I met the kids from the Life Skills High School. It's kind of a charter alternative school, and their way of teaching is not as regulated as a lot of other mainstream high schools. Well, it's a lot of very digital, and then when you have a question, you ask the teacher, and they come and help you. So that's kind of where I wanted to take my program. And last summer I met a couple people from the Life Skills High School, Rick and Joy, and they've been nothing but great for me. They provided a place. I kind of told them who I was and that I had a curriculum already written, and I had kids basically on standby, and they asked me what I needed, and they said, I said I needed a place, and so they gave it to me. Gratis, for nothing. So, how much time we got left here?
Perfect timing.
Okay.
So at this time, we're going to have Pat come up. Pat is also a community organizer, but he gets to hide behind the cameras normally. But he's going to give a presentation today on what makes a good presentation. So if you've been sitting in the audience thinking, I would love to present in front of 1 million cups, this is a great presentation for you. It's also general, if you give presentations, no matter where those presentations are, this is exactly for you because he's going to tell and give us some really good information. And we'll also have some question and answer time afterwards.
That's right.
Are you all set?
I think so. You see.
Maybe not. Hold on.
Oh.
Hey,
There we go. So it's working. So there's a lot that goes into doing a presentation. And so today I'm going to have to narrow that down, only having a short amount of time. I'm going to narrow it down to just designing presentation graphics and some of the things that go into, the thoughts that go into creating good graphics that are clear and tell your story and tell your message really clearly. So the first thing we want to do is ask ourselves, what is design? Is it just about something looking good? Is it pretty? Is it just aesthetics? Or is there some level of functionality to it? One of my favorite quotes related to this is from Steve Jobs. He said, design is not just what it looks like, it feels like. Design is how it works. Now, if he were alive today, he'd still be the greatest designer, I think, on the planet. And so, pay attention to this one. So there's 3 things we want to consider when we're designing, when we're putting together presentation graphics. Well, actually, the first thing I'd like to do is tell you, let's try this. So I'm going to stand over here, and would you do me a favor, and on the count of 3, I want you to point to the presentation, okay? 1, 2, 3. Some of you guys really got it. That's the most important thing for you to realize, that I'm the presentation. The presenter is the presentation. This is just your graphics. This is only used to help tell the story to your audience. One of the other things it's not is something that helps you to remember where you're going next. It's not your outline. Now there's a way of doing that. If you ever want to learn about it, the little tricks to it, there's different types of monitors that we can set up, and I can show you how to do that so you can actually have both. But really, the presentation is for your audience and is designed for your audience. So the first thing we need to consider is the message itself. What are you trying to say? Can you put it into a capsule so that you can say it really clearly? Do that first. Create an outline if you have to, but like Steve has taught me, and all my mentors from SCORE have said over and over again, we need to come up with that elevator speech, and sometimes even smaller. It's a concise way of saying what we're trying to get across. The next thing is our audience. We have to consider the audience. Whether it's a small group like this, and we have fairly decent presentation technologies to get to them, it makes a big difference who we're presenting to. Okay? And where they're coming from, and what they know, what they don't know. Are they receptive to your message? Are they already primed to hear it? Or are they a captive audience? Maybe your company is telling them they have to be there. So consider your audience. And then you want to consider the environment. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but the environment is more than just the room and the lights and the acoustics. Okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is message. The first thing I do when I start is I start creating presentation graphics, especially when I do it for a customer, is I ask myself 3 questions. The first question seems obvious. What is the message? What am I trying to say? The next one, this is probably for me the most difficult thing, is how can I visualize the message? And the reason why that's difficult for me is because sometimes it's not just a photograph that you can find on the web, or you can find in a stock photo collection. Sometimes you have to use metaphor. There's no perfect picture for what you want to do. So look at the logo, the icon that I used up there for message. I thought about who I was presenting to, your age, your technological savviness, and I thought, well, that's probably a good image to use to represent message. Maybe it works for all of you, maybe it doesn't. You have to think about these things. And finally, and this has nothing to do with design, really, but it's something that I always keep in front of me through the entire design process, and that is, what does success look like? What will it look like if I actually achieve my goal? And for that, we actually have to know what our goal is, because we can have a message, but we also have a goal for that message. Is it that somebody needs to buy something at the end of it? Do you want somebody to join you in your mission? Is it possible that you need to persuade or inspire somebody to take action on a cause? The next thing we're going to talk about is the audience. And we're going through this really quickly, and I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time, but you guys can talk to me later, and we can make appointments if you want to learn more about this. So just bear with me as we breeze through this. The audience. The first thing I think about is that you have to build rapport with the people that you're talking to. You have to have some way of actually impacting their lives. You have to be able to speak into their lives somehow, and so you have to build rapport. Now, that's not my strength as an actual presenter. I do better with the graphics, but you have to do that. Somehow, you have to create a relationship with your audience. And that is because the thing that I remember the most is that communication really involves community. And I don't think there's any place in this town where I can say that everybody here knows that really well, better than here. We are a tight-knit community. We are here to help one another, encourage one another. And every presentation is a give and take, right? It's just a fantastic group. So now that you've gotten some relationship with your people, so you've got this rapport built, you have to figure out, what are you trying to do? Do you want them to take action? Or maybe you want them to make a change in their lives. Maybe you're trying to educate, like I'm doing today. Or maybe you're trying to motivate or even inspire them to take action. So the most important thing to remember is that whether you're presenting to a small group like this, an intimate group where you know everybody in the room, they may have helped you with the presentation, they may know it's coming, or whether you're working with the opportunity of a lifetime to speak to a very large group in a very I want to say fancy, but a very well-designed and very well-equipped auditorium. You have to think about that because it's different. It'll be different for each audience. So the next thing we're going to talk about is environment. And I'll get to this. I think the most important thing for me to tell you is that you've got to keep in mind that the environment is not just the room. It's not just the lights. It's not just the acoustics. It's not just the time of day, things like that. It involves things outside of the room. All right? Now, one of the things that we will notice, you might have noticed over the last few weeks, is that actually it's been a couple months now where there's been construction going on outside. You could come into this room fully ready to present really complex data, And to have those jackhammers going on the outside could really affect that, your ability to communicate that. So if you can find out those things that are going on, is there going to be a noisy crowd next to you? If you can find out those things, then maybe you need to take some action on that. Maybe you need to simplify the message, change the pace of the message. So one of the environments we can work with is the meeting environment. But even this is not just standard, right? You could have a meeting, and you could have a nice whiteboard or a presentation like this, and it's a little bit different if your colleagues are in the room or if the president decides to sit in, right? They're going to need different information. You might actually have people that are in that room that are already resistant. For all you know, somebody got passed up for a job that you got. All these things you want to take into account. It's pretty complicated, but if you can, think it through. A lecture. What's different about a lecture? Well, normally you've got 2 hours of speaking in front of people, and everybody in front of you is taking notes. Has anybody heard the fallacy, we call these neuromyths, that people can multitask? It's not true. People cannot multitask. I've heard that some people said that women are better than men at multitasking. I think sometimes they're better at thinking in general, but just ask my wife. But we can't multitask. So every moment that they're taking copious notes in your lecture, they are not listening to you. And so you need to think about that and change the pace. Today we have so much technology that people go into lectures with recording devices or their phones, and they try to record so you can listen to it later. Man, that's just, I want to listen to that 2 or 3 more times. I don't think so. The next one is an informal situation where you might just have a quick projector set up with a projection screen set up, and you've got a couple of notes. It's something that you've done many times before and you're really familiar with the subject matter. So all these different environments will change how you present and why you present, really. And then finally, like that big seminar we were looking at, that was the big data symposium in San Jose. So if you're on a large seminar, what could be different there? Well, people might have paid to see you. There's a little bit more pressure there. Maybe people they need more education. They are coming because they have no idea about the subject, and they're there because they want to learn. Okay, so in order to handle these different considerations, we need to use some design tools, okay? Those design tools are hierarchy, space, contrast, and order. Now we're going to talk about hierarchy, and that's not, that doesn't mean who's the king of the presentation. That's really the precedence or the prevalence or the prominence of a specific object on your presentation. The next one is space. We won't get into that too much because it's a real controversial subject. It changes about every year. Whether people think that a lot of space is better, not so much space is better, whether the background should be white, whether the background should be dark. All this changes. So I would suggest that you do some research, and I'll point you in the right direction for that. Contrast is just basically, is something, the colors of an object saturated or not? Is it brighter? Is it more vibrant? Because the eye will be attracted to that. And then color, of course, can be used in a number of different ways. It has some value to it. I'm going to talk about 3 things that color will do for you, and I'm going to tell you about 2 things that you should never do with color. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is hierarchy. How do we make an object prevalent on the screen so that people see what we want them to see? They're focusing where I want them to focus. Well, one of the ways to do that, is size. The mind is attracted to large objects. We're attracted to moving objects, and we're attracted to things with signaling colors. That's yellow and orange and red. So size is an important thing. I want credit for not going with that joke. Color is also very important. And of course everybody thinks, well, that we know that, but how to use color appropriately is actually kind of a science, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. Saturation is related to contrast. Saturation is not just light and dark, it's how vibrant a color is. So we can make something, as you see in this example, you can make something more attractive to the eye simply by changing its color and making it more vibrant. This position attracts people's attention because we read left to right and top to bottom. The upper left-hand corner tends to attract attention here in the United States. And then texture. And this is a weird example. I don't think anybody would actually do that, make it look like salmon, but you could do other things too. You can use gradients and just patterns if you want to draw attention. So let's talk about each one of those individually. Actually, most of them. The first one is size. Obviously, your attention is going to the larger square here, right? So what could we do if the smaller square needed to stay small and we wanted the attention to be focused on that? Well, we can move it. We can move it to the upper left-hand corner. Now, I kind of fooled you here because right now you would notice that smaller square, and it's not really because, not just because, it's up in the upper left-hand corner. The other thing was motion. Motion attracted your eye to it, but it's the position that's keeping your eye there. It's keeping your attention there. What happens if you have three objects of all the same size? You just need them to be the same size. What can we do? I'm going to combine a lesson here, and I just changed this right before this meeting so that I could demonstrate something. I'm going to ask you to look at this, and I'm going to make a change to this so that your attention is drawn to it. Did you see anything? Just barely. Turn around if you would and take a look at the bright screen in the back. So we're back at that first slide, and that's the change. Okay? So you really have to pay attention to the technology that you're using and the environment that you're in, because this screen didn't even demonstrate that. So if I knew this was going to happen and I still needed to draw your attention to that middle square, I might do this instead. I might do this instead. You know, change the pattern, do something a little bit more obvious. Okay? Now, here's the fun example. Look at this for a couple minutes. I'm sorry, I know what it's doing to your eyes. Your eyes have no idea where to go, no idea where to rest, and your eyes are going, please help me, I need to breathe here. If I just add color, can you feel it? It's not just a matter of your eye being attracted, your eye actually got relaxed. You actually felt it. Ah, I know where to look now. You're helping your audience focus where you need them to focus. The next thing we're going to talk about is space. And as I said, we're not going to really talk too much about it, but I'm going to give you one good example. Active versus passive space. You need to research that. It's a very interesting topic if you're a graphics geek like me. But basically, active space is space around things that are symmetrical. So if everything's lined up in the middle. And passive space is the space around things that are non-symmetrical and how they affect the mind. So we're going to go into an example, not of active and passive space, but just in the use of space in general. We have a need in our presentations to create space. If we look at this, your message is right up front, loud and clear, but it's kind of yelling at us, right? It's almost screaming, as a matter of fact, because there's not enough space between the words, it's even hard to read. But if we simply change the format to something like this, you can see that your mind is able to gather that message very quickly. Entire marketing campaigns have been done with this. Remember the whole "got milk" thing? It's just a white background with the words "got milk?" ? That's all it was. It is absolutely effective. Okay? So contrast is the next thing. There's not too much to say about contrast, because what I'm trying to do is actually to get you to think. I'm not trying to tell you all the different techniques to use and how to do it in PowerPoint or Keynote or Illustrator or InDesign. But I'm going to give you one example of how contrast can be used. If you have a number of objects that are all the same on your screen, and there's times where you need to do that. You want to show sameness. But then you want to draw attention to that object, to one of those objects. You can simply change the contrast of some. This is an easy thing to do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back here to a slide, and I'm going to show you something you may not have even noticed. Do you remember when I showed you this slide? Now, I want you to pay attention to the question, what is design? Watch what happens when I show the quote from Steve Jobs. I want you to focus on the quote. So what happens to that is it faded. Did anybody notice that the first time? No. But it helps to get that out of your way and to help you to focus on what is really important on the slide. Now I got to find a way back to this slide. Okay, so we're at contrast, and Now we're going to talk about color. I told you we're going to talk about 3 things that color does. And we're going to talk about 2 things that color does that you never want to do. Actually, one of them is arguable, but not for me. So color can attract. Obviously, your eye is going right to the red Lego. Color can communicate. Now this is a good example. What is that picture of? What story is that symbol telling you? Anybody, just give me an idea of what you think it is.
Rocket.
A rocket? Anybody else?
Curtain opening.
Curtain opening, right? Anybody else?
Christmas Day.
Right. Anybody? Bueller? Yeah. Okay. It's showing a direction or a path, right? What if we change the color though?
Christmas tree.
It's a Christmas tree. Right? So the color tells the story. It's a highly stylized. Some of us don't think that way. It's a very stylized Christmas tree. But this came from a Christmas card. By changing the color, you actually make it unrecognizable, or it actually changes the meaning of it. But color can communicate a message. And color can connect. So if you have a whole bunch of things on, a whole bunch of objects on your screen that you want to connect, you can use color to connect them. Okay? So, now, the 2 things, I promise you, there's 2 things I want to tell you that you shouldn't do with color. Number 1, notice the color red here. This is not the standard RGB red, the pure red in your computer. It's not the one labeled red when you pick it in your color picker. Stay away from that color. It has no option but to screen. And I say that, but there might be times where you want to screen, and so go ahead and do it, but do it really carefully. Okay? Now, here's the one thing you should never, ever do. The effect you're experiencing is called stereo. I'm going to get rid of it because it can actually cause headaches for some people. Actually, I'm going to put it back here because I want to have. So, it's called chromostereopsis, and it's an illusion of depth that's caused by the certain color combinations. But your eye really can't figure out what that depth is. And so your eye will always be trying to figure it out, and it actually causes some confusion, some dizziness. It can cause headaches. They say it can even cause seizures. I've never heard of it happening, but they say it can. Okay, so we're going to skip past this slide. And questions? Comments? Tourette's-like outbursts?
So in the aspect of color, when I'm still in the escape room, we have one room that's just all about color, and then we have a color person. So how do you design with disability in mind? Can't focus, can't see, ADD, whatever.
Well,
Or colorblind.
yeah, for color blindness, well, the types of color blindness, the red-green color blindness is one, so you want to try, if you think that there might be people out there, and I'm not sure what the number is, but I think it's like 10%.
5 to 10%.
5 to 10% of the male population, or the overall population, and it's more prevalent in males. You want to consider that. If it's possible that you could have those people in the room, then you want to consider that. But sometimes you can't. Now, I wouldn't want to speak to what do you do with people with all these different disabilities because I don't have knowledge of those different disabilities. But if you're teaching to a group that has a specific cognitive disability, then you want to read up on it and take advantage of the ways that you might be able to teach them. That goes back to not only color, but to knowing your audience. Yeah?
So in the beginning, when you talked about multitasking and how we properly cannot multitask, what's your opinion on using a presentation versus not using a presentation and just speaking yourself?
Ken's going, yeah. Well, this is a great example. How could I possibly teach this, teaching graphics without showing you some graphics? So I have to. The idea is that you want to not compete with it. So the idea is that you can get somebody's attention. You notice that all my icons were kind of short, and they were easy for you to absorb, and then you could get back to paying attention to me. There was no large amounts of text on any of my slides. And so you just have to recognize that if people are looking there, they're not looking here, and they're not paying attention. And so pacing is important. I threw that out the window because of how fast I had to preach. How fast? Sorry, I'm also a pastor. So, so how fast I had to get this information out there. But pacing is very important. How many of you guys are teachers? So pacing, classroom pacing is huge. All right. Another thing that leads me into is bullet points, so too much text. Bullet points. There is a number of books out there, people who claim to know everything about PowerPoint, who say that you never use bullet points. And there's other people that say there's this 166 rule, that there should be only one point on a slide and no more than 6 bullet points and no more than 6 words per bullet point. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think you can use it however you want to, as long as it's intentional. Okay? And we don't have one of those special questions for me, so we're going to make this the last one.
There's different types of learners out there. There's visual learners, audio learners, people who read, and then there's like, you know, the kinesthetic learners, right? Kind of, how can you design a presentation, for example, to address all of their needs?
Yeah, so one of the things that sets my company apart from others in this is that we involve neuroscientists and neuroscience. We have a neuroscientist on staff, we have a cognitive psychologist on staff that actually help us to do these designs. The answer to that is we don't believe that that's true, that there are kinesthetic learners, that there are audio learners or visual learners. It's the content is more useful to use certain types of learning for certain types of content. And so if you design well, you'll reach everybody. You'll reach everybody. So I can point you to some of the research on that. It's National Institute of Health, it's cognitive neuroscientists, it's one of the neuromyths that are out there. So we don't believe that's true. I'm not saying it isn't, it's just we don't function that way because we don't believe it's true. All right, well, thank you very much.